So, as many of you know, the last couple of weeks, and I think until Easter, we've been talking about the book of Mark. And so, guess where we're going to be today? The book of Mark. But before that, I know a lot of you make fun of me for this a lot, but I mean, you guys make fun of me in general all the time, but I want you to know I love it. I'm not like offended when you guys make fun of me. I feel loved that way because I grew up in a home where like if I tear you down, I'm actually like trying to secretly lift you up and boost your confidence. I know that doesn't make sense. It kind of contradicts itself, but that's kind of the atmosphere that I grew up in. But as a lot of you know, I was homeschooled, okay? That's not news to anyone. Maybe it's obvious. I hope it's not obvious, but it might be obvious that I was homeschooled. But because of that, my family was really, really close. We were very family oriented. It was all about doing things together as a family. And at the time, you know, there were times that I hated that, but in all reality, there were a lot of times that I really loved it. And because of that, I'm really close to my mom. I'm close to my dad. We have a really, really good, healthy relationships among our family. But because of that, because I was close to my mom, and she was my best friend, sometimes, I hope she doesn't watch this later, but sometimes she would kind of maybe overstep her boundaries, you know, because she knew it was best for me. And so I can remember as a kid, now this may surprise some of you, but I was like a country hick wannabe growing up, okay? I loved target practicing. I loved wearing camo. I had this like hunter orange hoodie that I wore all the time because I thought it was cool. I've been hunting one time in my life, okay? And they didn't even let me have a gun. I just sat out there in the field and was supposed to text them if I saw something. But I love the idea of being country, like country music. I drove around a truck, but I grew up in town Medina. So I never even really lived in the country. But I did 4-H. I raised pigs. I would spend hours with my pigs just sitting down in the pen, petting them. I used to kiss their noses. Like I'm kind of ashamed to share that because I feel like that's not me anymore. But although if you do take me to the fair, I will go straight for the pig barn because I just have this odd love for pigs. I think they're the cutest things. But because of all of that, like I said, I grew up in 4-H. I was on junior fair board. I was on junior leaders. Loved 4-H. But there was this one part of 4-H that like nobody ever wanted to be known for. And that was the royal court, okay? Which is basically, if you don't know what that is, it's basically where all these 4-H kids get up there. I think you had to be at least a junior in high school. You get up and you stand in front of people and people come on, tons and tons of people come onto this pavilion. You have to dress up in this gown and then they crown the king and queen of the fair. Now, from my perspective, I thought those people were freaks, okay? I remember as a kid, you know, we would see the royal court walking down. We're like, you all look so silly, you know, in your gowns and your suits and your crowns and you're at the fair. Like, I always thought they looked goofy. We used to make fun of them. But my mom, as a kid, she'd always be like, Emily, one day I want you to run for queen. And I was like, no, we make fun of those people, Mom. And I used to tell her that. Well, one summer, it was my senior summer, and I'm on vacation with my friends, okay? And I didn't have a phone with me that week because I'd washed my phone in the washer, and so I didn't have a phone with me. Well, I come home, and Mom's like, oh, by the way, I sent in your application to be fair queen. And I was like, you didn't. This is when I talk about like maybe my mom oversteps sometimes because she thinks she knows what I want. And I was like, you did it. I'm like, I'm not going to the interview. Like they have this like long interview process that you have to go through. I had to dress up business casual. So I had to get like a suit. It was just totally embarrassing. I did not like any of it. But I humored my mom. I was like, I'm not going to win anyways. There are these kids who are well known in the fair. They're going to get voted for, and I'm not going to win anyways. So it's fine. I'll just humor my mom. Well, I go to the interview, and it goes really, really well. I get a call to say that I made it to the final round. So here I am. I'm dressing up in this gown, going to the fair. I'm standing on this big stage with a bunch of other girls and guys, and I have to like have a speech prepared. I mean, it's like a pageant, basically. You have to share what you're gifted in, like all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, it's fine. I'm not going to win. I'm just humoring my mom. Like, I don't want to embarrass her because she's on all these committees. Like, I'm just going to do it. Lo and behold, I won. So, this is not to brag on myself because I don't usually like to share that story because it's actually embarrassing. So I was fair queen, and I remember I won. I hated it. I did not want to do it. They made me like ride on this golf cart and wave to people, and I had a crown that that was a foot high on my head. And I remember the guy who was in charge of the royal court always being like, Emily, where's your crown? I'm like, I'm not wearing that thing. I'm sorry, I'm not cleaning out my pig pen with a huge crown on my head. Anyways, that's another story. I absolutely hated it. And I remember, this is really petty, but kids that I knew and I would work in the milkshake booth with and raise animals with, they were all like, she's a poser, she's not really country, I don't know why she won. And this was like the rumor all week long was like, why is she queen? She doesn't deserve it. Like stuff like that. It's so petty. It's fair queen, okay? One, it's embarrassing. Two, is it really an honor? I don't know. But I just remember there was like all this, like behind my back, people were like, she's a poser, she's not really country, she wears camo, but she lives in town. Like, that was the conversation that was going on. And I know that's a silly story, and we talk about, being a poser, but I kind of want to translate that into what's happening when Mark is writing his book. So basically, John Mark is writing to the non-Jews that live in Rome, okay? And so that's who he's writing to, and it's about 50 to 70 AD is the time that he is writing this letter to them. And if you know anything about that time period, you know that there were a lot of things that were starting to stir up among the Romans. And government was kind of chaotic, and all the while, the church is trying to figure out, who are we? What do we do? We're not just Jews anymore. Now we're Jews and we're Gentiles. And you have the Jews who feel entitled to everything because this is what they're born into. This is the faith that their ancestors talked about. Then you have the Gentiles who are kind of like, where's my place in all of this? Now I'm told that I can be a part of the church, but I'm not really accepted. We don't really know how to mesh well together. And so you have all this chaos with the Roman government, and then you also have all this chaos of the church trying to figure itself out. And if you know very much, and they guess about 70 AD, the Romans, they took over Jerusalem and they destroyed the temple. And so it's just chaos. Imagine, your faith is hardly defined. Today we have the whole Bible to read when we're trying to figure out what our faith should look like, what the church should look like. We have something to reference. But see, these Christians, they didn't have anything to reference. Like the book of Acts wasn't even written yet. The book of Mark was a letter that they hadn't even received yet. And so they're really just trying to figure out who they are and how they mesh together. Jesus had given them the Great Commission, but a lot of things are passed on verbally. Things were just kind of a mess. And they really are trying to figure out, how do we function together? And so I like the book of Mark because Mark doesn't really hold any punches. He kind of tells you the way it is. And I think that he's strategic in that because basically when the non-Jews are trying to figure out their faith, he's basically saying, this is it. We cut the book of Mark in half, and we see the beginning, it's all about miracles and the miraculous wonders that Jesus did and all of the difficult things that he told them they were going to have to face. The second half is all about his death. And so Mark, basically what he is saying is, okay, you may not know how to function together, but at the end of the day, this is what it's about. This is what your faith is. He is defining their faith. And so honestly, if you want to know what your faith is all about, read the book of Mark, because he basically lays it out for you. And he basically defines your faith. And so we've been talking about this is Jesus. And so as we're talking about who Jesus is and what it means to us, today I want to talk about following Jesus, and I want it to be defined. Because at the end of the day, who is Jesus and what does he mean to us? And I think that this is a really, really real question that we need to ask ourselves. Although we may be saved, who is Jesus and what does that look like to me today? So I want to start off with a story, and you might know this story. I'm not going to actually pull it up in Scripture because it's a little more involved, but I'm basically just going to tell it to you, but you can find it at the beginning of Mark. I believe it's chapter 2. So I want you to imagine this. So your whole life, you grew up, you were kind of poor, but you were happy, you were content. Your family owned a fishing business, and that's just what you did. That's how you provided for your family. It's likely that you were a fisherman because you didn't go to school to be a rabbi, and so you were kind of seen as a lower class, but this is what you did. You fished, you fed your family that way, you were content, you were happy. That's what you were destined to do for the rest of your life. Well, this is basically where we find the disciples before Jesus calls them. And so I imagine the disciples started hearing rumors about this guy Jesus who just randomly appeared and said, hey, I'm God. Because, you know, Jesus was pretty silent about who he was until he hit about 30. And so people started hearing rumors, there's this guy named Jesus, and he's claiming, that he is going to, redeem the Gentiles, and he is going to reconcile them unto God, and all this stuff. Well, one day, Jesus comes up to these men who are fishing, and he says, hey, I want you to drop your net, and I want you to come with me, and I will make you fishers of men. So he's basically saying, you fish right now, but I'm going to make you fishers of men. And the crazy part about this is like a small passage of scripture. And so Jesus comes up to them and said, follow me, drop your nets, and I'll make you fishers of men. And guess what they do? They drop their nets and they follow him. Now, we read this and we think, that's kind of crazy. Why would they do that? I mean, some of these men were married. Some of these men had kids. This was their livelihood, okay? This was their income. This was their family. This was their friends. This is where they lived. This is what they did. And as soon as Jesus came, they dropped everything and they followed him. And then we read shortly after that, we see that Jesus sent them off 2 by 2. To go preach the good news to other people. And so all this is kind of happening really, really fast. And I want to read Mark chapter 3, verse 13 through 15. So if you want to go ahead and go there, or if you just want to write it down. Let me find it really fast. Somebody turned my page. Okay, so verse 13, it said, Jesus went up on a mountainside and called to him those he wanted. And so these are these men that he had just asked to drop their nets and come follow him. These are those guys, okay? And this is chapter 3, so this is pretty early on in the game. And they came to him. He appointed 12. Imagine who those 12 are. 12 disciples. Designating them apostles, that they might be with him, and that he might send them out to preach, and to have authority to drive out demons. And so we read this and we think, that's pretty radical. That's pretty crazy. Jesus had just called them, they had just left everything. And now Jesus is saying, I want you to be with me, I want you to preach the gospel, and I want you to cast out demons. What? I can't even imagine being there and be like, okay, sure, Jesus, cool, okay. I don't even know if you're legit yet. That's probably what they're thinking. But no, these guys are like, okay, Jesus, I'll follow you. See, here's the thing. This is kind of the nature of the faith that we claim. It is urgent and it requires maturity. In order to truly follow Jesus, we must be urgent with our faith. We must be willing to drop everything and follow him. Because it is urgent. Time is passing. People are dying. And so this requires us to be mature and urgent in our faith. And so I want to revisit the passage that I read, Mark chapter 3. And basically you can kind of break this down into 3 different parts. So 1, he called us to be with him. And so we are called to dwell in his presence, not just ask for presence. And I think sometimes we have this, idea that our faith is all about me and what God can give me. But it's also about the time that we spend with him. See, Jesus wants to go deeper with us than just a Sunday morning. This is not where it should start, and this is not where it should end, but it should be continual. He wants to be involved in our everyday lives. And you may ask, okay, well, what does that practically look like? Well, I have some practical ways that Jesus can be involved in your everyday life, ways that you can be with him. 1, going deeper in our relationships with others, investing in others. 2, spending time in his word. Actually spending time reading his word. You see, side note, I think sometimes people are like, I don't hear anything from God, but we forget that one of the number one ways that Jesus speaks to us is through his word. God rarely speaks audibly. He rarely speaks through dreams, but he speaks through his word daily if we are willing to read it. Also, not speeding up our worship time. When's the last time that you sat and you played worship music in your car and you just worshiped him? When's the last time that we had a worship service like this and you really engage in his presence, like Steve was talking about this morning? Another thing is not putting other things before him. And I think that kind of goes along with not putting our own sinful desires first, because I think sometimes we forget that literally the definition of sin is that which separates us from him. And so to truly be in a relationship with him, we must separate ourselves from sin, because that basically creates a wedge between us and him. And so if we want to be with him, we must, as much as we can. Obviously, we're always going to sin and we're always going to fall short. But we must remove as much sin as we can in our own lives in order to be closer with him. So the second thing that I notice in this passage is we are called to share what God has done in us with others. And I know I've said this before, but the good news not shared with others is bad news. Like, literally, the gospel means good news. And so news not shared is not news at all. But the gospel is for everyone. So if you're holding back your faith from others, is it really real to you? Because if it is real, you understand that this is good news to share with others. And the third thing, we are called to live every day with a radical faith, not a complacent knowledge. And what do I mean by that? See, it's one thing to know who Jesus is, but it's another thing to live like we believe it. You see, the Bible says that even the demons believe that Jesus is God, but they don't follow him. And so you can believe that Jesus is God, you can believe that God exists, you can believe that he created the world, and still not be a follower of Jesus. Believe it or not, you can. Your life has to show that you know that he is God. Side note, and I don't want to get morbid, but this is true. Every day, Christians are putting their lives on the line. People just like you, people who answered the call to salvation, they attended church, and one day they realized, I have to do more. And so they dropped everything like the disciples did, and they said, okay, I'm going to live a radical faith for Jesus. And now they put their lives on the line. We are no different than them. We are saved by the same Jesus, and we claim to have the same faith as them. And I'm not saying that we're all called to put our lives on the line, but just so you know, we're not any different than them. We have the same faith as them. And I even think, this is personally challenging, and I'm going to use this as an example because she's sitting right over there. But Sarah Winter, okay, she's my best friend, so I'm going to brag on her for a moment. But she has claimed, she's followed Jesus for how long? How long has it been?
9 years.
9 years, okay? Didn't grow up in a Christian home, but she has dropped everything, saying, I'm going to put marriage on hold, I'm going to put my relationships in America on hold, and I'm going to go serve people in Laos because they need to know Jesus. Talk about a radical faith. And she knows the same Jesus that we do. So in what way can we respond like that? And it may not look like going to Laos, but we should have the same response, the same willingness to sacrifice for the gospel that Sarah's having right now. And whatever that looks like, maybe that's just stepping out of your comfort zone and sharing the gospel with someone you work with. Maybe it's financially, maybe putting yourself out there, giving more towards missions than you normally would, or maybe more than you feel like you're capable of. But knowing that if you have a radical faith, God will meet you where you are. God will meet you. When's the last time you heard about someone doing crazy for God and he didn't come through? I have never heard of that. I've never heard of someone having a radical faith and Jesus didn't meet them halfway. But see, the thing is we have to have a radical faith and step out in order for him to meet us halfway. But he's not going to do all the work. This is something that we have to want. See, this is basically what Mark is saying to the church in Rome. He is saying, okay, you claim to follow Jesus. Okay, this is following Jesus defined. This is what it is. You will spend time with him, you will preach his word, and you will walk in authority and have a radical faith that God can do something in any situation. So I think sometimes we get this idea that following Jesus is a Band-Aid that covers up our wounds from the past. Or we think that following Jesus gives us purpose. Or we think that following Jesus is a crutch. Now here's the thing. Following Jesus does give you purpose. Following Jesus does bring healing. But we don't follow Jesus because of those things. We follow him because he is God. That is why we follow him. That's why people's faith wavers, because when they think, oh, like, I'm still struggling with this issue from my past, so God must not be real. Well, at the end of the day, we follow him not because of that, but we follow him because of who he is. And so we have to understand that our faith goes so much farther beyond a Sunday morning. This right here, this is a product of following Jesus, but this is not following Jesus necessarily. So there's this quote by Leonard Ravenhill, who was a great evangelist. He's passed away, I want to say in the early 2000s. But he wrote a lot of books, and he was a very, very wise man. And one of my favorite quotes is, it's up on the screen, "Are the things you're living for worth Christ dying for?" Are the things that you're giving your life to, know that Jesus died for that. Whatever you're living, however you're living your life, Jesus died for that. And so, are you making the most of your life? When you really think about that, I want you to assess your current state. Are you truly following him? And I'm not saying that, growing is a process, but I just want to kind of show you where you can be. Okay, wherever you're at right now, as long as you're moving forward, I don't want you to be discouraged by this. I don't want you to feel bad about your life, okay? Because I'm not there. I have not made it in any way, shape, or form. But this is where you can be, and this is where we should want to be. So it's time for us to realize that we don't have a lot of time to waste. I won't pretend that it's easy. I'm not going to sugarcoat it and say that following Jesus is super easy and he is just going to open every door and you're going to walk right through and you're never going to have a struggle. You're never going to deal with sickness. You're never going to deal with heartache. I'm not going to sugarcoat it because Jesus didn't come to sugarcoat it. But he came to tell us the truth. And so I want to read a scripture, and this is kind of to wrap it up. Because today I think the message that I want to get is we cannot be complacent. We cannot just sit here and believe in Jesus but not do anything about it. I want following Jesus to be simple, and I want it to be defined. I want us to understand what it means, but it means that we must become mature and we must be urgent with the things that are happening here. And so I want to read you Ephesians 4, verse 14 through 16, and it says, "Then we will no longer be immature like children. We won't be tossed and blown about in every wind of new teaching. We will not be influenced when people try to trick us with lies so clever they sound like the truth. Instead, we will speak the truth in love, growing in every way more and more like Christ, who is the head of the body, the church. He makes the whole body fit together perfectly as each part does his own special work. It helps other parts grow so that the whole body is healthy and growing and full of love." And so we have to do our part. We have to be willing to really follow Jesus in order for this thing to work. In order for church to work, in order for the church to move, in order for the church to impact, we have to be true followers of Jesus. Because you see, I want you to imagine where you were before you knew Jesus. Where were you at? Maybe you were a kid and you don't remember, like me. I don't remember, but I can imagine who I would be without him. But I want you to imagine you're minding your own business and suddenly Jesus comes up to your boat and you're fishing and you're doing your thing. Jesus comes up to your boat and he says, "I want you to come follow me." And obviously, because we're all here, we answered to that and we followed him. We dropped our nets, we dropped our security, and we said, "Okay, Jesus, we're following you." Okay, but now Jesus has called us to the mountain, and he has called us his disciples, but he has given us these commands saying, okay, this is the faith that you've chosen. I've called you, you followed me, I'm going to call you up to the mountain, and now I'm defining what it means to be a true follower of Jesus. And here's the thing, is we can't leave one of these things out. This is Jesus. This is the faith that we claim. We are called to dwell in his presence. Not just ask for presence, but dwell in his presence. We are called to share what God has done in us with others, because the good news is meant to be shared. We literally have the hope of the world. I think sometimes as Christians we want to just fix the world because we see how much heartache and injustice there is. But we have the answer to all that, and that is Jesus. We have the answer to all the issues, and that is the gospel. That is the good news. So why are we keeping it quiet? And 3, we are called to live every day with a radical faith, not a complacent knowledge. So where can you put your words into actions in your life? Whether it's with finances, whether it's your involvement in church, whether it's relationships at work, relationships with your family, where can you put your actions where your mouth is? You say you follow Jesus, but what is your life saying? And so we don't just get to choose one of these. We don't just get to decide, okay, well, I'm going to spend time with Jesus, but I'm not going to share with others what it's like. We don't get to choose. And I think everyone in this room would call themselves a follower of Jesus. So I want you to ask yourself, they're not on the screen, but in what areas that we talked about today, those 3 things, being in his presence, preaching the good news, and having a radical faith, in what areas could we grow in? And I know for myself, I'll be honest, the one area that I know that I could grow in is my radical faith for Jesus. I go to Bible college. I have a lot of knowledge about the Bible. I mean, there are people who have way more than me, but I have more than others. But am I going to let that impact the way that I live my life, or is it just going to be things that I know? Because then what does that do for anyone? And so for me, myself, that's an area that I could grow in. I could have a more radical faith. I look at Sarah's life, and that really challenges me. Would I be willing to drop everything and move to Laos and sacrifice all of that? But Sarah and I encounter the same Jesus. We know the same Jesus. But would my response be the same as hers? And so, are you balanced? Do you have these things in your life? And if you don't, I want to have Steve come up. But I want to have some time just to kind of reflect where you're at. I believe that God is really moving in this church, and God wants to do so much, and he has made that so clear and so evident. I don't know about you guys, but there's been a shift in this church in the way that services have gone, in relationships, in worship. There's just been a shift. But here's the thing. Now it's up to us to respond to that. How are we going to move forward? How are we going to grasp onto what God is doing? And what difference is that going to make in our lives? Because we have decided to follow Jesus. And this next song, I thought it fit perfectly with this sermon. And it says, Christ is enough for me. And I have decided to follow Jesus because he is enough. And so we have decided to follow Jesus, but do we truly believe that Christ is enough? And are we going to live this way? Are we going to drop everything and follow him because we know that he really is God? But this is following Jesus defined. This is what it means to follow Jesus. And so I'm going to have Brandon over there, Ronnie is back there, and I'll be over here. And if you want to have prayer for one of these areas, or it could be unrelated to this sermon, if you have something on your heart that you need prayer for, I want you to feel welcome to come and ask for prayer. But I really want this time to be a time mostly of reflection and what can we do differently to be the church, to be true followers of Jesus, and take hold of what God has placed, because I think it's time to take it to the next level. I really do. So we're going to just go ahead and worship God. I just ask that you would be in this place this morning. God, I pray that, God, something that I said, something that you put on my heart, spoke to someone this morning. God, even if it was something that I accidentally said and it meant something to someone, God, I just ask, God, that you would move in this place, God, that you would move in our hearts, and God, that we would respond to that. God, that we would want to spend more time with you, and even when we don't want to, God, that we would. God, that even when we're afraid to share our faith because we feel like maybe we don't know enough, God, that we would. And God, even when we're scared, God, that we would have the faith to step out because we know who you are. And God, I pray that our lives would show that. And we ask all these things in your precious and holy name.